Today, a federal appeals court panel upheld a law that could ban TikTok. The three-justice panel ruled that the law does not violate the First Amendment, something TikTok has argued. Now the social media platform is in a fight for its survival in the U.S., just 1 month until the law goes into effect. The law would require TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, to divest from the app or face a ban in the U.S. and on app stores. Joining us now is the Hill's courts and legal reporter, Zach Schoenfeld. Zach, this is a major blow for TikTok. What do we know about the ruling?
Hey, Drew, this decision brings the prospect of a nationwide TikTok ban one step closer to becoming reality. If this ruling is allowed to stand, it means that Congress's law will go into effect, which would require TikTok by January 19th of next year to either divest itself from its Chinese ownership or otherwise ban the platform nationwide. So this was a very anticipated ruling. The thrust of TikTok's argument here was that the law violates the First Amendment rights of both the company itself as well as its content creators. In its decision today, the three-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals agreed that the law does implicate free speech concerns, but that they said, even under the most strict First Amendment test that courts use, that the government had cleared its burden here because of a compelling governmental interest in national security. The Justice Department, in defending this law, had argued that there were potential concerns about the Chinese government either accessing users' data or even just covertly manipulating the content algorithm on TikTok. So saying that those national security concerns supersede any free speech concerns. There were a number of other arguments that TikTok raised, but those were rejected as well.
What is next for TikTok? Will we see this case perhaps make it all the way to the Supreme Court?
That is the expectation. In a statement following today's ruling, TikTok said that the Supreme Court has a long history of protecting Americans' free speech rights. The company says that it believes that the court will do the same here. So certainly signaling that they're going to take this case to the nation's highest court. But with just over a month to go until that January 19th deadline, it seems that the court is not going to have the time to consider it on its normal docket before then. So I do think it's more likely that we're likely to see an emergency application here, in which case it would go through a truncated process that's very quick. And just one other wrinkle here that might throw a wrench into things is the fact that the way the law is designed, there is that January 19th deadline, but it also allows the sitting president to issue a 90-day extension if TikTok is in the process of trying to divest itself. So there is also the possibility of President Biden stepping in here and issuing that delay too.
All right, thank you, Zach Schoenfeld. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Drew.
President-elect Trump is reaffirming his support for his nominee to serve as Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth's ability to lead the department is being questioned amid reports of sexual misconduct, excessive drinking, and financial mismanagement. Trump posting on social media, Pete Hegseth is doing very well. His support runs strong and deep. But among Senate Republicans, there are major doubts, with one senator telling The Hill the nomination is likely doomed. Julia Manchester, the Hill national political reporter, joins us to discuss this and more. Trump posted this message on social media, but what is your reporting on his efforts to actually lobby senators and get them to go along with this nomination that right now is in flux?
Well, he's certainly reaching out. I think this public display on Truth Social is certainly sending a message, but I think that Trump is also sending very mixed messages. I mean, earlier this week, he was calling up Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and asking him if he would be interested in the position. Ron DeSantis seemingly says he is seriously, or said he, behind closed doors, he's seriously considering this. So this is something we're watching closely in terms of how Trump is approaching DeSantis and Hegseth here. Though I think what we're seeing is Senate Republicans, though, are really putting up a front to Trump, something that Trump, I don't think, really expected with some of these nominations. I mean, we saw how quickly Matt Gaetz fell and that scrutiny quickly moved to Hegseth. So if Hegseth ends up dropping out, that's going to put more pressure on other nominees like Tulsi Gabbard, for example.
Hegseth met with Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, who's seen as a key voice on the Senate Armed Services Committee. She said after the meeting that she was still undecided. The Hill is quoting one unidentified senator saying there are 7 or 8 Republican senators likely to vote no, and that it's only a matter of time until he's replaced as the nominee. Do you think we're still kind of in a state of flux, or is that senator that was quoted by The Hill as it's only a matter of time, is that actually the truth?
It seems like we're moving towards that direction where it could only be a matter of time. We'll see if Trump and these lobbying efforts, if anything changes. We know that this is very fluid, but for someone like Joni Ernst, someone who herself has been floated for the position, that's pretty major. She has a lot of sway in the defense world, and we know that Hegseth, for example, has talked about banning or not having women serve in combat roles in the military. Joni Ernst has a daughter who's in the military. So I think in the sexual assault allegations, the questions about how he managed those two nonprofits, the allegations of drinking on the job, it's just really piling on. And there seems to be something new every day. And I think the defense we've seen from Hegseth, having his mother go on Fox News to defend him, for example, it kind of goes to show that saying in politics, when you're explaining, you're not winning. I think he's doing too much explaining.
Hegseth probably won't end up winning any support from Democrats. Neither, I would assume, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, RFK Jr., but there are some of Trump's nominees that seem to be that Democrats seem to be giving space for consideration. This is a little bit maybe different strategy than we saw after Trump's first election. Do you think it's a shift in mindset of how Democrats are going to treat the nominees more broadly?
I think it's a shift maybe a bit in mindset. I think it's a very different administration, the second one, compared to his first. I think the transition has, for the most part, with the exception of these two big hiccups with Hegseth and, of course, Matt Gaetz, it's been more organized. But for someone like Marco Rubio, for example, he's someone who's worked in a bipartisan fashion. He has praise from a lot of Democrats. So I think someone like him, he'll have no problem being confirmed. Kristi Noem for Homeland Security Secretary. Yeah, she's a partisan figure. The confirmation hearing may get heated, but I think she's likely to get confirmed. But when it comes to these more controversial picks like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, that's a real issue. For RFK Jr., there's also the question of, does he have issues with Republicans too? Remember, this is someone who is very supportive of the abortion rights movement, so that stands to get in his way. For Tulsi Gabbard, this meeting she had in 2017 with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, I'm curious to see how the developments in Syria this week sort of impact it. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but like I said, if Hegseth falls, then those two other nominees, particularly Gabbard, falls under more scrutiny.
One of the more interesting Democrats I've seen or thought to watch during this has been John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania. He's not only, when it comes to these nominees, but he's called on Biden to pardon Trump for his hush money case. In New York, he's voiced admiration for Elon Musk. Musk then reciprocated. I think after he was first elected, he was dismissed a little bit in Democratic circles. He was dealing with some health issues, but it seems like he's becoming a more important voice within the Democratic caucus, especially as they try to rebuild and figure out ways to win in swing states. What do you make of Fetterman at this moment?
Yeah, Fetterman's so fascinating because he's been seen, prior to his time becoming a senator, as a very progressive figure, but at the same time, he's been able to successfully walk that line in a swing state like Pennsylvania and be able to appeal to some of the progressive portions of the party, while at the same time talking to working class voters, talking to swing voters. He's done that very successfully, but he has ticked a lot of Democrats, particularly progressives, off. He has been a very staunch supporter of Israel and sometimes appears to troll pro-Palestinian members of the Democratic Party, so that's sort of been a point of contention. But he has been someone who has very much praised Marco Rubio, for example. He's reached across the aisle. Someone like John Fetterman understands that when you come from a purple state, you can't be that partisan. There has to be, some push and pull there, and he's proving that, I think, with his praise of some of these nominees.
Ticking off the progressive wing of the party might be actually politically advantageous
Right.
for a Democrat in a state like Pennsylvania. Looking at Trump's nominees more broadly, I think Axios had a piece where they wrote up about all the billionaires, like more than a dozen billionaires involved in the Trump administration in these key roles. I wonder if you think that there's any danger in Trump hurting his populist mandate by bringing in all these elitists.
Well, you already see Democrats attacking him for that, and you see, talking to Democrats this week. I've been covering the race for Democratic National Committee chair, and they talk about this importance of leaning in to economic populism. We've heard Bernie Sanders, someone who very much attacks millionaires and billionaires frequently. I think there certainly is a danger to that, but I think there's a way to maybe skirt that too. I think a lot of it has to do with the language. Remember, Trump himself is a very wealthy man, someone who is not seen initially, before he was running for president, was not seen as one of the every man in the country. But the way he talks, his language, he's able to appeal to voters who live a very different life from him.
One of the other things you notice about the incoming Trump administration is all the women that are being appointed to key roles. Susie Wiles, the first ever female chief of staff. What do you think is behind that, and what is Trump? Do you think that he maybe sees differently than his first term, and that could be the motivation behind this change?
Yeah, even though Kamala Harris, vice president, won women outright, and Democrats normally do, we saw that women played a key role, particularly white women, Hispanic women too, even though he narrowly lost that group, in helping Trump win the White House. So I think it's certainly strategic. I think when people look at a White House cabinet, they want to see a cabinet that is reflective of much of the country. But it's definitely, I think we see the Republican Party really seeking to diversify itself and to appeal to a broader group of voters, whether it's women, whether it's people of color. And I think you're seeing the Trump administration try to tap into that. That being said, though, the Trump administration, if you're looking at diversity numbers and just looking at the makeup of it, it's not as diverse as the Biden administration. But former Trump officials I speak with, talk about that Trump isn't doing this purposefully with diversity in mind. He's appointing and nominating these individuals based on their own merit.
Trump is going to tape his first post-election interview with NBC's Kristen Welker for Meet the Press episode that airs this Sunday. It's interesting, Trump is very critical of what he calls the quote-unquote mainstream media, but this first interview is going to NBC. What do you read in that? Why NBC first? And what do you expect to be the goal of going to NBC for that interview?
Well, look, Trump during the campaign, and I think we've seen it, before the campaign even started, he's been reaching out to more unconventional media platforms like podcasts. We certainly saw the rise of podcasts, whether it was Alex Cooper and Call Her Daddy or Joe Rogan and his podcast, the rise of podcasts and their importance during this election. That being said, though, even though we're seeing Americans sort of branch out and maybe go to more unconventional forms of media, like podcasts, for example, the mainstream media is still, a component that Donald Trump needs to play ball with. He's going to, see the major networks like NBC on a daily basis in the White House. So he needs to be able to reach various audiences, multiple audiences. We know that these audiences are definitely being segmented. So for mainstream outlets like NBC, their audience may not be as big as it used to be. So Donald Trump can, go to other outlets, but at the same time, he still needs them. NBC, as well as The Hill, other mainstream outlets, we're all part of the White House press corps. He needs to, be involved in that and maintain that relationship.
As an old school media guy, New York guy, I wonder if there's a part in his heart that he thinks that, if I could win NBC over, that'd be an accomplishment. Let's leave it at that. Julia Manchester, national political reporter. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Trev.
The manhunt continues for the suspect in the deadly shooting of a United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. Right now, the New York City Police Department is looking to question a person of interest who, it says, took a bus from Georgia to the city late last month and used a fake ID to book a hostel in uptown Manhattan. Take a look. This is the person police are looking for. Investigators say the man in these photos lowered his mask because he was flirting with the woman who checked him into his room at the hostel. While they have not identified the person as a suspect, News Nation sources close to the investigation say they believe this is the gunman. Investigators have also reportedly found a burner phone near the crime scene and have tested a water bottle and a protein bar wrapper for DNA evidence. Meantime, the health insurers are taking extra precautions to protect members of their leadership. Government health insurance provider Centene says it will now be holding its Investor Day virtually. Meantime, another health insurer, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, is now reversing a recent controversial policy that limited anesthesia use in surgeries. According to the American Society of Anesthesiologists, the policy would have meant the insurer would not pay for anesthesia care if the surgery procedure took longer than a predetermined amount of time. That policy caused widespread outcry, with many taking to social media to voice their concerns. The company said its decision to reverse course came after widespread misinformation about the policy, saying, quote, "It never was and never will be the policy of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield to not pay for medically necessary anesthesia services." The public outrage surrounding this policy comes as opinions about U.S. healthcare have hit a 24-year low, according to a new Gallup poll. 16% of Americans say the U.S. healthcare system is in a state of crisis, and 54% say it has major problems. The top issues mentioned by respondents: cost and access. Nearly 6 years after the Notre Dame Cathedral caught fire, the Parisian landmark is set to reopen this weekend. The fire in the spring of 2019 caused its iconic wooden spire and roof to collapse. In attendance for the grand reopening will be both First Lady Jill Biden and President-elect Donald Trump. Trump received some backlash when the cathedral burned after theorizing on social media that flying water tankers could be used to put out the fire. French officials pushed back on that suggestion, indicating that dropping water from aircraft could cause the whole structure to collapse. Trump took to Truth Social earlier this week, saying, quote, "President Emmanuel Macron has done a wonderful job ensuring that Notre Dame has been fully restored to its full level of glory, and even more so, it will be a very special day for all." The president-elect is also set to meet with several foreign leaders during his trip to France, including French President Emmanuel Macron. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petroma. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.